Welcome to the CIO Evolution.
Welcome to the show. I'm Chris Jablonski, Director of CXO Revolutionaries and Community, and the host of this podcast. Zenith Live 24 wrapped up a few weeks ago, and I am sitting on so much good content from Zscaler's annual flagship event that I felt compelled to stitch together some highlights from the CXO Experience track using audio recordings from Las Vegas. In this special episode, you are going to hear excerpts of the finest moments and key points about our technology innovation from Zscaler executives, including Renan Raz, who was the co-founder and CEO of Avalor, now part of Zscaler, Nilima Rustagi, Vice President of Product Management, Dhaval Sharma, Senior Vice President of Product Management, and Nathan Howe, Vice President of Innovation. First up, the data fabric for cybersecurity, which is critical to get control over data scattered across tens or even hundreds of cybersecurity tools. By ending security data sprawl, which can render a lot of data nearly unusable, you can instead derive a lot of value from it. Listen to Renan Raz, now Vice President and GM of Data Analytics, explain it.
So just to show you a little bit of the stuff that you really need in order to build a good data pipeline or a data fabric. So when it came to be, we started off with building the connectors, bringing the data in. So of course, threat intel coming in, more than 150 connectors. We have a technology called AnySource that allows you to bring any type of data and telemetry that exists within your realm, right? Either first party or third party. And we basically take that data and we have a very powerful entity resolution engine. And an entity resolution, what does that mean? Basically saying, if I'm seeing an asset across multiple sources, I will understand that it's the same asset. If I have a vulnerability across multiple sources, I will understand it's the same vulnerability. If I have a path to getting a risk down in a very fast way instead of going across multiple vulnerabilities, I would also understand that by querying the fabric. And the third piece is basically solutions around reporting and putting that data in your downstream applications, such as ticketing systems, CMDBs, etc. So the three main layers of every data fabric, or a good one, would be the first one is connecting all that data and having a very robust methodology of ingesting any type of data at any scale, any format, etc. The second one is that we automatically kind of do that entity resolution and create that graph of information of your organization. And of course, allow you to create custom metrics, track different KPIs that you may have, etc. And the third bit is to actually operate on top of it, which is, like I said previously, on the data lake side, there's usually the data there, but you don't really act on top of it. So let's start with some of those things. So first, connecting any source that you want. We talked about that. Like I said, more than 150 connectors today. We normalize all that data for you. And what does that mean? A lot of data solutions are basically taking all your attributes across all of your sources and just appending attribute and kind of doing, if you know that kind of statement saying you have the name of the source underscore the name of the attribute. So let's say you have an operating system value that exists in Tenable, or you have it in CrowdStrike, or you have it even at Zscaler or anything around that. And each one of them has a different value. Now, which one do you choose? Which one is the right one, etc. So we do that entity resolution out of the box. Not only that, now that you have all that asset information, we can do that correlation across the board and share with you information around what is not covered, which asset am I seeing here, I'm not seeing there, what is missing from a policy standpoint, etc. And now, by combining that data with the inline data that Zscaler has, you'll have way more context on those specific assets. Of course, super important, you need to contextualize that to your organization. So you're not just confined to what we think is the right way to go. You can actually extend that data model or that semantics to more and more attributes out of the box and connecting to ones that are you bringing in, bring your own semantics. So in this example, just a very basic one, bringing that business unit information and correlating it together with the assets or the vulnerabilities or anything around that. Then when you're creating your CISO dashboard or CIO dashboard or your board member dashboard, or even just to the practitioners, you can slice and dice the data basically on whichever attribute on that side as well. Very important piece of any data project is lineage, right? How did it came to be that this is the attribute that I'm looking at, right? Super, super important. And not only that, I don't know how are you still experiencing that, because my guess is that you're now a little bit up in the chain. But when I was opening tickets to engineers to actually go ahead and solve those vulnerabilities, The first thing I got was a pushback. Right? Why is this critical? Why am I getting this? Why do you think it's me? Why did it change from A to B? Like all of those questions, the back and forth on Slack or emails, takes 4 days just to get the situation right. So by providing all that lineage out of the box, both sides are talking about the exact same thing. So it really saves all that kind of friction between the teams. And of course, building on top of it, dashboards and reporting across the board, either to management or to the practitioners themselves.
With a data fabric in place, you can now use it to power capabilities such as breach prediction, an emerging capability, and the timing could not be better. Reactive breach response is no longer a practical strategy. Even when endpoint security software identifies issues, security analysts and incident response experts are often delayed or can't mobilize quickly enough. This gives attackers adequate time to cause damage and disruption. Curious what it is and how it works? Here's a great introduction by Zscaler's Nilima Rastagi.
The idea behind Breach Predictor is how can we actually see what has happened in your environment and based on that do two things. One is predict how much of a chance is there for breach, and two, lead you to actually policy recommendations that you can fix in the product. And this is our idea of basically reactive to moving to preemptive, right? Breach Predictor is not an XDR, it's not a SOAR, it's not a SIM. The idea here is to take capabilities from various security logs and then do the prediction on the breaches side. There are three things to start with in the 1.0 product that we are going to start with. So we are doing attack and malware activity mapping to MITRE kill chain TTPs, right? So you have a lot of, today basically every IOC typically ends up showing up as an alert. XDR is doing some amount of stitching across network and endpoint. What we are trying in Breach is to actually show it across full TTP, full MITRE attack stages, which is the 14 stages. We are also visualizing the attack path. So not only are we mapping it to TTPs, we are going to take those, map it to attack path, and then on the attack path also use AI, predictive AI, to show you what is the prediction on the breach side based on what we are seeing in your environment. So how does it work? We're starting with our first party logs. We are taking ZIA logs and sandbox data and pulling it without really moving it any third party data source. We are not moving it to SIM. We're just pulling it from NSS logs, taking our known attack IOCs, which our Threat Labs team builds from a TTP perspective, and then feeding it into a generative AI and predictive modeling to identify emerging attacks in your environment. And using that model, we give attack visibility, the predictive piece, and the policy recommendations. Going forward, we will also be using ZPA and deception logs and third-party endpoint logs to add more confidence to the predictive piece.
Breach prediction, powered by a data fabric composed of data from logs from sources like Zscaler private access, deception, and third-party endpoint protection, can fundamentally transform the way the industry approaches cybersecurity. With it, leaders like you can take a proactive stance for safeguarding your organization in a world where the risks just keep on growing. Shifting gears, Dhaval Sharma offers the latest thinking on how to overcome the perennial challenge of segmentation to reduce your attack surface, particularly your internal attack surface. Here's a technical breakdown of how Zscaler Private Access, a cloud-native service that replaces legacy remote access tools like VPNs and VDIs, allows exceptional fine-grained control.
When we rolled out ZPA, our big focus was your attack surface goes behind ZPA. Your namespace exposure goes away, right? So your external attack surface reduces significantly. But there is still internal attack surface problem, right? Users with privileged access, or someone who is able to connect to a network, comes to office, and then able to move laterally inside the network. We build ZPA in some sophisticated ways, like we don't even resolve DNS before you get authenticated as a user, because we don't want a user to run an nmap command to figure out what is running inside. So part of our last 6-7 years of journey in ZPA has helped us understand areas where we still see customers struggling with segmentation. So one area is we introduced this concept of application segmentation or app segmentation in ZPA, where you can cluster applications manually to say, here are my crown jewel applications. I want to basically segment them. And in those crown jewel applications, it takes, like you can say, finance is used by finance department only. But large organizations typically have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of applications. And these could be like a server with a privileged information running that some developer set up 20 years ago. No one wants to touch it. So how do you understand what these things are and who is accessing it? So one of the big focus area for us in ZPA has been, using machine learning, has been to understand the behavioral patterns, to understand who is accessing what, and start giving you more meaningful recommendation on which users are going to certain applications, and allow you to create granular segmentation policies that are very specific to a specific part of organization. So the moment you put a specific application access policy in ZPA, you basically make that application go dark for the rest of the internal organization as well. Not just external, your internal attack surface reduces significantly as well. And where we are going more and more granular with this machine learning-based approach is now not just do high-level department or AD group-based policies, but we can also say, like, marketing could be a huge department. There could be only 10 people inside marketing accessing an application. So clustering users within a department and understanding the application they're accessing, is it similar to other applications that they are accessing? And then be able to give you more fine-grained policy recommendations. So these are some examples I was talking about users, but the same concept applies to workloads as well. Workloads are like users. Workloads are, in certain ways, they are either traffic is going to internet, or workloads are talking to other workloads. But there is a identity problem in the workload. There's no universal standard like SAML or something that exists for workloads.
Dhaval also covered the air-gap acquisition, giving customers the option of agentless segmentation to protect east-west traffic in branch offices, campuses, factories, and plants with critical operational technology infrastructure. Speaking of non-traditional zero trust, we end with the latest from our innovation leaders and 5G experts in their work to seamlessly connect devices like surveillance cameras and shelf-scanning robots to the Zscaler Zero Trust Exchange. Here's Nathan Howe on extending Zero Trust to a wide range of SIM-based IoT devices over cellular networks, prevalent in shipping, logistics, energy, and other industries.
Before anyone asks the question, because it might pop up, we did try to put Client Connector on a SIM card. We spent about a year of engineering to try and minimize the size of it to run it on a SIM. For anyone who's interested, a SIM actually has a little CPU on it. It runs at 44 megahertz. It can run a TCP IP stack. It cannot run TLS tunnels. We tried. We really tried. And because of that, we decided to go a different path. So we couldn't put the client-based software into the devices, into those various logistics environments and on those SIMs, because also then it would be a challenge to manage the code. So what we thought about was, how do we then still provide connectivity for all these other devices in an ecosystem that doesn't exist within your four walls? And that's where the idea of the Zero Trust SIM was born. So I'm going to walk you step by step through it. Number one, there is two ways to do this. I can give you a Zscaler SIM. We have Jay showed it on screen. We have that available. But more than likely, you're going to have a scenario where you can't just do a truck roll and replace all the SIMs and all the sites. So you already have a solution where you have SIMs from somebody else. We can work with those. But I'll just stick with the Zscaler SIM for a second, and I'll come into the second one in a minute. The second part is that the way in which we've built our SIM is that it's completely redundant and resilient over any network. So as an example, in my hands here I have two phones. I have, this is an iOS phone, and this is my Android phone. And my Android phone is currently on AT&T, and this is on T-Mobile. and they're both still going through the same control plane. So we've built it so it can be completely available on any mobile network. The goal is, and it's not so much of an issue here in the US, but in other parts of the world, there are roaming between countries. There is signal coverage issues, and that happens sometimes here, and maybe T-Mobile has a better reception than AT&T or Verizon. What we do is we'll always connect to the available signal, so that should your device get out of range of the T-Mobile network, AT&T will be there, and we'll be able to connect to that. Again, the same control plane exists for all of those things. So 1 is a SIM, 2 is resiliency from a multi-network path roaming, and the final part is the zero trust cell edge, we're calling it. And the cellular edge is basically a piece of Zscaler software, very similar to what we've seen before with Branch Connector and Cloud Connector, but it sits within the mobile network. So it actually is a direct hop from a telco into us. And that's why we can make it work for AT&T and T-Mobile. They're both plugged into us. And we have that available for about 400 telcos globally, if you have distribution around the world. As I said, I'm Australian. I live in Germany, and I have my phones. I use my phones as my demos. We're not pushing the end user case for phones. We prefer you to use Client Connector for that. But if you have an idea about end user devices, I'm happy to talk about that as well. We're primarily focusing on IoT and OT. And the key here in all this is not just to give you access out, where all the traffic from the devices goes out and is protected, either ZIA and ZPA. So you can access your private applications from this without ever having to put Client Connector on. We use the cell edge to be able to create connections in, and that's the little blue line on the right-hand side. But the real power comes into the fact that we've actually built it to be bidirectional. So if you need to remotely log into your EV charger, or you need to remotely log into a system, you can do that. All you have to do is just spin up either Client Connector or what Deepak's going to cover in a minute, privileged remote access. So that allows us to actually... And SDK as well. That's coming as well. That's right. So that's the high level. And what I'm going to do is actually just show you one more slide, which is the opposite of this, which is not just this is the Zscaler service. The other service would be if I was to deliver this with a telco partner. And you can see right away the visual is quite stark. I can't guarantee the resiliency and roaming. You can still use their network. You can still use the T-Mobile network, the AT&T, the Verizon network, or whomever it may be. We'll still be able to run our cell edge, and that traffic can be sent from those SIMs to us. We just don't have the ability to make sure that we can fail you from one network to the next. Still, a lot of our customers are actually rolling this out because they have, as I said, hundreds of thousands of SIMs deployed globally, and they just can't roll a truck out to go and replace them all.
In summary, there is now a way to get zero trust connectivity beyond the four walls of a building, site, or factory. By using SIM cards that connect to cellular and satellite networks, you can apply the same controls and policies in your IT ecosystem to cover IoT devices. For more details behind what you heard today, you can watch the main stage keynotes from Zenith Live over on www.zscaler.com/events/Zenith Live 2024. Visit CXO Revolutionaries on Zscaler.com for related content, executive authored stories, and to see what is coming up on the event schedule. Thank you for tuning in, and please subscribe using your preferred podcast player.
Thanks for listening to the CIO Evolution. Check back with your podcast provider regularly for more episodes. You can find more episodes along with other podcasts on the CXO Revolutionaries website at revolutionaries.zscaler.com. Statements by Zscaler podcasters and guests are informational only and should never be construed as legal advice. You should consult your legal advisor on matters related to you or your business. Zscaler makes no warranties, express, implied, or statutory as to the content of this podcast, and it is provided as is. Content on this podcast may contain forward-looking statements that are current as of the date of the recording and subject to change. These statements are subject to the safe harbor provisions created by the Private Securities Litigation Reform Act of 1995. Full legal disclaimers are available at revolutionaries.zscaler.com. Copyright 2021.